The text I have in mind here is Romans 8:32. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. Then comes a rhetorical question. How will he not also with him graciously give us all things? So here's the cross in the first half of that verse, right? He who did not spare his own son, there's the cross. And then comes the precious logic. You know how rhetorical questions work? If you ask a rhetorical question and you don't answer it, which Paul doesn't, you assume everybody knows the answer, and it is obvious what the answer is. How will he not give them graciously all things? Answer, he will. That's the answer. Of course he will. So you read it like this. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, will most certainly with him graciously give us all things. That's the logic. He didn't spare his own son. He gave him up for us all. Therefore, we know with absolute certainty he will put all of his sovereignty in the service of his omnipotent mercy and obliterate every inadequacy in the performance of his will. Who will he do that for? Sometimes we read our Bibles and just neglect to ask, is this me? Who will he do this for? And he gives the answer to that in the previous verses. I'll read 28 to 30. We know that for those who love God, that's who he's doing it for. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. For those who are called, that's who he's doing it for. Those who love God and who are called. Verse 29, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. So he foreknew someone, he predestined someone, he called someone, he justified someone, and it is so sure, Paul can speak in the past tense, he glorified someone. And then he asks in verse 31, what shall we say to this absolutely certain chain? And his answer is verse 32. If God didn't spare his son, he's going to put all of his omnipotent mercy at the service of keeping us, whom he foreknew and predestined and called and justified, so that we will make it to the end. So those whom he foreknew, he predestined. Those whom he predestined, he called. Those whom he called, he justified. And those whom he justified, he glorified. From predestination to glorification, nobody is lost. Every obstacle is obliterated. And he bases that on the cross in verse 32. If he didn't spare his own son, you may be sure that he will spare no effort and exert all of his sovereign power mercifully to keep you. So the radical revelation of the cross in verse 32 is that God's sovereignty always serves his omnipotent mercy for the foreknown, the predestined, the called, and the justified. You will always be treated better than you deserve.